morning, everyone. Thank you so much for making time to stop by and join us. We realize it's a very busy agenda this week, and there's so many places to see. So my name is Samuel Obi Banda. I'm an assistant underwriter with the African Trade Insurance Agency. I'm based in Nairobi in Kenya. We are here today to mark the official launch of the Transparency Tool. And with me here today are three of our colleagues in the sector who will help us with the press conference and with the launch as well. So I'll introduce my colleague based in Tanzania, Tusekile Kibonde. You can take a seat. Joining Tuse on stage will be, we have Babette Stein from KFW. All right. And for those developing projects across sub-Saharan Africa or in Zambia especially, we had from the GetFit Secretariat, we have Judith joining us as well. Thank you. So just for your comfort, we expect to take about 15 to 20 minutes with this launch and with this press conference. I'll run through a general introduction and my colleagues will take it up from there as well. So as a starting point, it's helpful to give you a bit of context in terms of what we are launching. It's called the Transparency Tool. It's a joint initiative between ATI and the German Development Bank, KFW. The general idea behind the Transparency Tool is to answer one key question in the market. How quickly or how do national utilities make payments to independent power producers? So to give you a practical example, you're developing a project in Malawi and you ask yourself the question, how quickly does ESCOM make payments to IPPs operational there? You're developing a project in Zambia and you ask yourselves, how quickly does ZESCO make payments to IPPs in that market? We hope with this particular transparency tool to answer that question and to bring more clarity. You can refer to the slides over there with a bit more information, but my colleagues here will probably touch on a few points and how beneficial that can be. A few quick facts for you to go through. We are in partnership with KFW in setting up the Transparency Tool. We have contracted Dun & Bradstreet to help with hosting the online platform, and they'll be responsible for the vetting of the information as well as maintaining the platform itself. We'll be using Microsoft Power BI as the official operating platform. The platform, as you will see in a second, is very user-friendly, and it will be open to all IPPs provided they sign a terms of use agreement, and it will be available in some countries that my colleagues will touch on as well. Some of the screenshots we have prepared for you in terms of the types of reports you can expect from the Transparency Tool. This is a good example because as an IPP operating in any of the countries where the tool will be available, you can see from the screen over there that you have a breakdown in terms of how the IPP is being paid, how it compares with other IPPs in the market, and it gives you a general idea of how many days past due your payments are. So we expect to develop this alongside a dozen other reports for IPPs, a similar number on an off-taker level, and then lastly, you have reports that ATI will be able to generate internally. So what you have there is a report that gives you insight in terms of how one off-taker, say ZESCO in Zambia or UTCL in Uganda, compares with other off-takers. Think of ESCOM in South Africa. Think of SBEE in Benin. You can think of EEP in Ethiopia. So such a report will give you an indication of how many days past due each particular off-taker makes their payments. I'll hand over the baton to my colleague Tusekile, who will touch on a few points as well.
Good morning. I'm going to touch on, let you know where we are as ATI on this product. Basically, we have signed a MOU with utility companies in some of the member countries, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Finance. Basically, it allows us to be able to launch a product, and each of these member countries benefit out of the transparency tool. So we have signed MOUs with Burundi, we have Benin, Madagascar, we have Zambia, Zambia, Malawi as well. And we are in the process of having other countries like Ethiopia and Ghana, which are going to join us soon. So basically, with the benefit out of this, of the MOU, it allows the IPP to share the PPA with us so that we can assess and monitor the transparency tool. And what is the cost for this? There's no cost to use the transparency tool. Basically, you just have to sign up and agree on the terms and conditions. In order for energy is a key important factor for development of Africa. As ATI, we thought it's important for us to focus on the energy sector and really enhance the insurance capacity in the African continent. Thank you to KFW and the EIB who have facilitated us in order to launch this product and work with us in order to provide and enhance capacity in Africa. As a result, ATI has become a strong reputation in underwriting transaction in the energy sector in Africa. What are the key benefits out of this? In the long run, what it means with the transparency tool. Basically, it helps lift the confidence of the off-taker. Basically, it helps anyone who has been perceiving off-taker as being a risky utility company. It really lowers and gives the real risk of that utility company. Because once with the transparency tool, basically you're able to monitor how the payment records are paid for each of the IPPs, and you can compare with other IPPs, the payment records. Another benefit out of it lowers the cost of financing and as well the insurance. Basically, you can, at the end of the day, as an IPP, you might not even need to use any other alternative guarantees. And it also helps you to benefit out of the facilities you may have with your lenders. And for that, I think I may invite my colleague from KFW who can talk more about how the product has been very good beneficial for the lenders.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be part of this innovative transparency tool today, of this launch. The transparency tool and the RLSF are joint initiatives by KFW and ATI. KFW is funding from the German government, and they shall help African countries to reap the benefits for the renewable energy potential we have in the continent. As technology evolves, it transforms the way we generate and consume electricity, and KFW aims to support the partners in this transition by reducing barriers to private investments in electricity generation. And I think this is extremely important, that we have private investments in the sector. The launch of the transparency tool is an important and right step. It will complement our programs we have, like the Get Fit programs in Africa, as well as our financing of state-owned utilities. Thanks to our partner ATI, we have now the RLSF and the transparency tool that will help us to align the perceived risk with the real liquidity risk of the various off-takers. And for us, it's important whether we think that there's lots of risk is just perceived and not real, and this is what we want to find out with the transparency tool, and therefore we consider it such an important initiative. Once the available data set has been reached, the participating parties will benefit from a clear picture regarding the payment trends of African power utilities. Not only will these timely insights help IPPs and lenders to make investment decisions, the tool will hopefully also strengthen the accountability among market participants. We hope to demonstrate over time that the power utilities can be reliable paymasters, thereby reducing the costs of financing for IPPs and improving investors' sentiment towards the energy sector in Africa. Looking ahead, we are confident that the transparency tool can play a vital role in mobilizing private capital for African power markets. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm just here to touch on some of the benefits that we believe the transparency tool can introduce, especially for developers. As indicated, I'm based in Zambia, working on the Get Fit Zambia program. Everybody is aware, I think, of all of the financial challenges that are currently being faced by a number of utilities, whether it's in South Africa, Malawi, Zambia. And that does not only introduce risks and uncertainty from a financing perspective, but also from a timing perspective, as well as from developers' willingness to invest in the first place. We've experienced quite a number of developers asking us about certain payment matters related to ZESCO's ability to pay, and this transparency tool will be very beneficial, as it would allow them to independently access a tool that's able to demonstrate payments of all of the utilities. So they can assess Zambia against Malawi, against all of the other countries. What we also hope that it can do for developers is also to allow them to make an assessment on payment days and therefore assess cash flows, which obviously will be impacting financing risk, as well as the cost of their projects, as well as the DRC requirements of the various developers. What we're also hoping that it could do from a get-fit point of view in terms of structuring of tenders, it allows us the ability then to assess the best tools that we should make available from a guarantee point of view, whether or not actually it would be required on that specific tender. So for us, and having discussed with a few developers, the tool would definitely bring some benefits to developers. Lastly, and maybe also just worth mentioning, is some of the refinancing related to some of the projects. I think once projects start performing after COD, and especially if it's clear that entities are paying, it would be a lot easier for some of the developers to start refinancing those projects. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much. So we still have a few more minutes for any questions that may be posed by the audience that we have. Then we'll try our best to respond to those. On the screen, you have some contact details in case you'd like to get in touch with us as well.
Hello, good morning. One question I have is if the program covers only state utilities companies as off-takers, or also third party in case of a corporate PPA. Of course, corporate PPA or commercial PPA is not very usually often used so far in Africa, but it will be soon. So the question goes, does the program cover state utilities companies as off-takers or also third parties? Or if it doesn't cover third parties yet as off-takers, are you considering to use it in the near future to cover commercial and corporate PPAs too?
All right, thank you so much for that. So as a starting point, to refer to the point that Tusekile raised, at the moment we've signed MOUs across 6 markets, which allows us to collect the information on the public off-takers in those countries. To your specific point, where we are seeing more and more private sector and commercial PPAs, we do expect at some point to extend the information available to the private sector as well and to incorporate private off-takers. The key difference that's there is when you're looking at a public off-taker, one key challenge is to get hold of their financials and to get hold of updated financial statements. So with the tool, hopefully to respond to that market gap. And on the private sector end, provided there is demand and provided we see a continued growth with the number of C&I projects across the continent, we do expect at some point to extend the transparency to incorporate private sector PPAs as well, provided the counterparties to the agreement give us consent. So we do expect to be able to do that for you. Thank you.
A question for our colleague from GetFit in Zambia. Obviously, the credit rating of ZESCO is central to what you're doing. What results are you getting from the transparency tool? Is that showing that the real risk is greater than the perceived risk, or vice versa?
I think it's probably both. At the moment, I think there's a lot of perception around whether or not ZESCO is paying and which IPPs it is actually paying. So I think what we are hoping to do with the transparency tool is to have independent assessment of how those payments are working, how frequent it is, and whether the situation is actually improving rather than getting worse. Have I answered your question?
Thank you. So just to add on that, if you look at the screen that we have behind me, In addition to a general report on an off-taker level, such a report allows you to compare internally within the context of ZESCO. So say you have 5 operating IPPs, such a report allows you to compare how you as IPP1 is being paid in comparison to the other IPPs in that sector. So this can be beneficial from the project level and from the lenders as well. So in as much as there's a global delay in payments to IPPs in the market, such an additional report allows you to compare what the delay for you guys, if at all, is with other developers in the sector as well. So there will be additional reports from the two that can be beneficial apart from the global picture itself. Thank you. I'm not sure if we have any more questions.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. The ministerial roundtables will be kicking off in 2 minutes in Conference Hall 1, up the stairs at the back of the exhibition hall, follow the signs to the conference room. Thank you very much.
Sure. So if there are no more questions for now, thank you very much for making time. Just to add, most of us here will be participating in panels, particularly tomorrow on GetFit Zambia. So we expect to touch on the transparency tool, on the GetFit program, and on the liquidity facility that we have, RLSF. But the entire team is here for you if you have any more questions. Thank you.